This is a D6 generation Pip. One of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a Pip. A short Pip. Little something. About anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today.
Hey, welcome back to another Pip from the D6 generation. And it seems like, Raef Granger is back with me again.
Yes.
And it seems like Raef is really enjoying talking to me about dungeon mastering.
That's how it seems.
So he keeps asking me, hey, can we do another DM Academy? So here we are with yet another DM Academy. I think we're going to keep doing these until Raef gets tired of them or you guys start emailing us and telling us to stop. I'm not sure which. But in any case, Raef, good to have you back on the show here. What's the preoccupation with dungeon mastering here, my friend?
All right. So, I felt like the last one, even though it was a nice full hour, I still had about 4 or 5 questions to talk to you about. So who knows? This could even go into a fourth one.
Who knows?
According to my calculations, this is DM Academy 3. I don't know if that adds up.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's
what I have in my notes. So I wouldn't call it a fascination so much as that I feel like we have a platform for, listeners to be listening. And if they can learn from experienced gamers, then why not share that knowledge? So I would say it's both, this is a super fun game that you're running, like we've talked about. And I think all my players agree with me, my fellow players, and also desire to share the info. So how's that sound?
Well, that's nice. Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right. Question 1.
Yeah.
I have 4 questions. How do you handle the short rest, the long rest, versus the character's powers? So let me give you a little backstory here. Because folks, Russ doesn't know the questions. I don't send them to him ahead of time.
I know nothing. I get no information about these things.
That's right. You have to answer live and on the spot.
That's the problem with being like the main host of the podcast is you don't get to when guests come on, they're like, hey, can I preview the questions in advance? No, I get none of that. I get no respect. It's just whatever. I'm going to show up and ask you questions, Wakeland. This is how it rolls.
That's how it's going to be. Right. At least with me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm curious about is one, give a brief overview if people are like, oh yeah, what is a short rest? How's it different from a long rest? But what I'm really worrying myself about or wondering myself about is how is it that you balance it? In other words, it could just be as player characters when we've used up all of our spells, we could just be like, okay, I need a long rest now. Whoop, and now we're fully powered. So how do you create that as part of the balance, part of the narrative? I think we talked about it a little bit where you're like, well, don't forget, there could always be a wandering monster. And that was more a tactical thing. I'm more in, and you could talk about that, of course, but I'm more interested in how you think of it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. So first let's define them and then let's talk about this because this is actually a really, really good question. And I think it's an important tool in the Dungeon Master's toolbox. So, there's in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and resting has always been sort of a way for characters to recover, from their injuries and things. But in 5th edition, they simplified it, but it's also got some pretty elegant things. So, a long rest. Let's start with the long rest. The long rest needs to be at least 8 hours, right? So it's in game time, obviously. So it's a pretty good amount of time. Right. So basically it's like a sleep, like a full night's sleep sort of way you think of it. And during the long rest, players recover pretty much all of their spell slots, right? And all of their hit points. That's the interesting thing, right? So when you do a long rest, you get all your hit points back. Doesn't matter. You can be down to 1 hit point from 80. Doesn't matter. You get them all back. So that's pretty powerful, right? Now, the interesting thing, though, is there are 2 sort of mechanics in the game that don't fully reset after a long rest. The first one is your hit dice. So you sort of have 2 parts to your health. You have your hit points and you have your hit dice. So your hit points are, everybody knows what those are, right? Those are the number of damage points you can take before you go unconscious. Mm-hmm. Your hit dice, in older games of D&D, you just use hit dice to roll up your hit points. So if you had a powerful character like a D10 character, you'd roll a D10. If you had 4 D10 for your hit points, you'd roll those and that would be it. And as you level up, you get one more hit die to roll for your total hit points. But in 5th edition, your hit dice are a stat you track, because also when you take a short rest, you do not get all your hit points back. Instead, when you take a short rest, which is only an hour, you can spend some number of your hit dice to roll to recover some number of your hit points, right? So that example I gave earlier, you're down to 1 hit point and you have 80. Let's say you have 10 hit dice or 5 hit dice. You can choose how many hit dice you want to spend. And the interesting thing in 5th edition is too, you can roll the first one and then decide that's enough, or you can you can spend another one and roll it. So you can kind of spend as you go. You don't have to declare them before you roll. So basically, the thing about that is in your long rest, you don't get all your hit dice back. I'm going to mess up the exact number. I want to say it's like 1 or 2, or it's a number of your level or something like that. But you don't get them all back. So basically, it takes several days of long rests before you can fully recover all your hit dice. So, and a short rest, by the way, is 1 hour. So, and the other rule is you cannot take a long rest more than once every 24 hours. So your players can't be like, I'm going to rest 8 hours, and then I'm going to go fight a big monster, and then I'm going to rest 8 hours more and go in the next room and fight a big monster. No, you'd have to wait another whole day for that to actually happen.
Oh, okay.
And with a short rest, of course, your players can take a lot more short rests. But the problem with that plan is eventually you're going to run out of hit dice to heal with. And then short rests don't really help you anymore once you run out of hit dice. And if you burn all your hit dice on your short rest, even a long rest won't fully repopulate all your hit dice. So you're still it's still going to take you several days to fully recover. So that's sort of like the long sort of effects of getting badly injured that still play out in 5th edition. Now there's sort of one more effect that we haven't used a lot this campaign, although I've played with it a little bit. I've used it elsewhere in other campaigns more. And that's the concept of exhaustion, which is a brilliant 5th edition mechanic.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
And how exhaustion works is when you do something to become exhausting, and there's a bunch of things you can do, like hike up a long mountain or get in really bad cold or really bad heat, or just invent something like in the campaign. One of the characters has an axe that makes him feel really tired and weary and uncomfortable in the woods. So if he spent too much time in the woods, I would give him a level of exhaustion. And there's the 5 levels of exhaustion, and each of the levels imposes a different penalty on the character. If you're level 1 exhaustion, I believe you have disadvantage on skill checks. And on level 2 levels exhaustion, they stack. And then all of a sudden you have disadvantage on attacks, and then you move at half speed and all these other things. If you get to 5 levels of exhaustion, I believe you die. So you got to avoid that. But the other interesting thing is you only recover 1 level of exhaustion per long rest. So if you're really badly exhausted, it also takes several days to fully recover from that. So exhaustion is also bad. So there's these ongoing mechanics besides just hit points that are bad if players get too much of them and take multiple long rests. So back to your question, which is, as a dungeon master, how do you use these sorts of things? Well, I think what's interesting is that I read a really good blog post about this. Like dungeon masters, you can use rests and the ability or inability to take a rest to really control the pacing of the game, right?
Yes.
So, because if you can't get to if your characters can't get back to a long rest for whatever reason, things really start to deplete. The other thing too is short rests don't automatically recharge spell slots. It depends on your character's class and the feats they've taken. So some characters, like certain types of wizards, do get more spells back during short rests, others don't. So there's all kinds of ways you can try to get some extra advantage in short rests, but generally speaking, you don't really recover a lot of spells on a short rest either. So the short rest, you can sneak a short rest in more often, but getting at 8 hours is tricky. And so as a dungeon master, you really want to set up a story situation where you don't really ever want to be in a situation with a dungeon master where there's zero time pressure on the characters and nothing really matters, and they can fight a battle and take a day off and fight a battle and take a day off. It doesn't feel right. It's not very exciting. It's not very dramatic. But B, it's too easy. It's like the easy button, right? It's like hitting save after every moment. So you want to create things and situations, like we had at Cragmar Castle where the 2 dwarves are suffering. There isn't time to take a break. People are, there's critical things you got to get done. And you'll notice there's hints now in the Lost Mine campaign that maybe it's already been a bit of time and maybe the bad guy's already doing things and maybe there's something we should sort of accelerate what we want to do. And you can see some of the characters are feeling that. Like John will say every once in a while, hey, maybe we shouldn't take a long rest yet, guys. Maybe we got to get, so there are some players that are kind of noticing that if we wait too long, things are going to get worse.
Okay. I think you answered it, because the question I was going to follow up with, but you answered, was even with all the game mechanics I found when I've tried it, people are in the middle of the dungeon. They know they can't take a long rest in there, right? Wandering monsters are going to deserve it. But then they go, well, we'll just hike up the 2 floors and we'll just sort of camp out 300 yards from the entrance. And then as a DM, I've been in the past being like, oh, well, I guess I got to throw some encountering monsters as they go that far. But then the players seem like they're kind of annoyed. They're kind of like, look, we just want to go out there, rest, and then come back. Right. But what I hear you saying, so I'm like, well, that solution hasn't worked for me in the past. So for what I hear you saying is you might handle that to be like, well, okay, we can make it where just for expediency's sake, I'm going to roll on the table, but you can make it up, but that's going to eat up, a day or 3/4 of the day, and we don't know what's going on. And then there's
something that's losing a day is bad, right? You want to make a day bad, like it was getting worse at the cursed woods, right? The curse was getting stronger and getting worse, or you put someone in peril, or so. Yeah, I don't think wandering monsters are a good way, or the threat of wandering monsters are necessarily the best way to prevent arrest, although it's certainly a approach. Like you don't want to rest in a dangerous area. Plus, by the way, getting interrupted in a rest resets it.
I know. I was saying like that rule mechanic hasn't worked for me for the reason.
That's a trick, but it's more of an annoying way. What you really want to do is have the players put the pressure on themselves.
Yes.
What you really want to have happen is you want to have the party arguing over whether they can rest or not, or arguing over whether they can do that side quest or not, or arguing. You want the players. So as a DM, you just want to put the problem in front of them and let the players work through the solution. So you can choose to rest now and be much stronger and have a much probably easier battle. But there's a chance that the thing you really want to get, like let's say you're trying to get 1,000 gold that is hidden in this cave. Well, you just learned that they're carting it out every hour. They're getting, 20 gold pieces out because little guys are stealing.
Right.
So if you wait a day, your 1,000 gold piece haul is going to be 500. But you can wait a day and only get 500 gold, but be healthy. The battle's going to be easier, So it's like, that's a very simple example. But something like that would all of a sudden, you can imagine there be a party argument about whether or not we should wait.
Okay.
Do you really need that spell, wizard? Come on, you can tough it out, kind of thing.
Okay, I see. Follow-up question. Do you keep, let's call it a doomsday clock is ticking, another day gone could cause problems for Auntie and Phandalin. Is that a loosey-goosey thing you've got in your mind? Or is there literally a sort of time clock you're keeping where off the screen certain events are happening after so many days occur?
It's somewhere in the middle. So it's not like, sometimes I make it very specific. So sometimes when really, really dramatic moments are happening, I do have round timers on, like you got to get through the dungeon in a certain amount of time or something else will happen. I've had campaigns where there's earthquakes going on and things are caving in and all kinds of stuff like that. So in those I track by or in the big grand finale in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I had a big battle going on outside. And so every round you skipped, something might happen and make things worse. Reinforcements might show up, things like that. So I do that. In this case, I keep it a little looser. It's like by the day. And remember, I told you that I like to think about what the antagonists are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what I hope it feels like is the more time you give, the more time the antagonists can further their plans. So hopefully it feels like there's this guy out there that you guys know is, or gal or somebody. There's this creature out there called the Black Spider that's doing something. And they seem to be making progress on their plans. And the longer you wait, the more they're going to progress on their plans. And at some point, you may realize like, oh, if we'd gotten there sooner, maybe this would have been an easier situation because they wouldn't have been as far along in their machinations. Right. So like that might come to pass. But I think there's already some of that, right? Like John was like, man, they got both the dwarves and they drained them almost entirely of blood. And that's, I know that's on us because we went to the Cyclopses kind of thing. Like, and that happened, right? Like they wouldn't have been as far as along with that. And because that happened, there's other things that are happening. So the bad guys are getting sort of, every time you guys get distracted, the bad guys get like some free chances to do stuff. Now it's not automatic. Sometimes I roll for them. So I don't, because they don't always do the perfect thing, but they do get more shots on goal. Let's put it that way.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. All right.
But it can be fun, Raef. If you find it helpful, like make some tables up, like one of the things I would say as a dungeon master is try to stay out of the just straight up deciding what happens. Like, let yourself roll the dice, because I find too, like, I feel bad if I'm like, well, the bad guy just immediately goes to master plan mode. I'm like, no, maybe you wouldn't automatically. I say, well, let's make a table. I'll make a table on the side. And then each time you guys take more time, I'm going to roll on the table. I don't tell you that. I'm just rolling on the table. And sometimes he screws up and he goes the wrong way in his little plan. It doesn't work out and he's experimenting or whatever. But then, oh my God, he rolled a natural 100 on his first try. Holy crap. He's really making progress. I hope the guys don't take much longer. Kind of thing. It's kind of how it goes. But then it's not on me anymore. I don't feel like as a dungeon master, I'm like, ooh, aren't I being a jerk? It's like, wow, the bad guy got really lucky there.
It really answers it, because if the beginning of the premise that you had said what's fun for you is you're just part of the story. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's what you're wrestling with. So the table solves that. You're creating. Yeah,
I'm not making an easy button for the bad guy. The dice, right? And that's really important. I think I don't know if I said this at a prior DM Academy, but sometimes in our campaign, Seppi will jokingly say, I think we've talked about this. He'll jokingly say, like, you can't role play through dice, right? I think is what he says, and I think that's funny. And I think what he means by that is, I can't, no matter how good of a role player I am, if I roll bad dice, it doesn't matter. But I think that's really important. I think the dice have a story to tell and they're part of the story. And I think if you don't roll the dice, non-combat skills don't ever matter. That's which is a problem, right? I think early on you said, Russ, this is the first campaign I've ever seen anybody use horse handling, animal handling. And that's because non-combat skills matter to me. I want you to roll for it because you're not a horse handler, Raef, but your character might be.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And same for the DM. Like as a DM, I'm not trying to make a decision. The dice will tell me if the bad guys got lucky or not. And I do that in combat. Sometimes I'll say, I'm going to roll for the bad guy. I mean, you've heard me in the Cyclops episode. I did it a couple times because I think that's important. I think it's important for the DM not to use their perfect knowledge all the time. Now, certain bad guys, maybe the ultra bosses, I might be a little more, hands-on with those guys because maybe I want them to be super smart or smart as I am, whatever that's worth. But I think that's helpful because it's hard as the DM to make the tough decision. And sometimes the bad guys will do the ruthlessly effective thing. And you'll almost never choose that as an unbiased DM. But if the die rolls a natural 20 when the bad guy's trying to spot you, well, now the dice are telling you the bad guy spotted you.
Yes. Yeah, the dice tell the story. I like that too. Yeah. Okay. Question 2. You ready for this?
Yes.
How do you handle death, Russ? No, I paused for dramatic effect, but I have more.
That is dramatic. Personally or in campaigns?
Right, exactly. No, in campaign, but I have more to follow up for that. What I mean is when we live in a world that has magic and powerful wizards and potions that can be made up out of thin air, and I know we talked about, how to keep the monsters somewhat balanced. So we're going to presume that the monsters are balanced and it just happens. And then there's a character that's dead. How do you think about that as a GM in a world where there's magic and anything's possible?
Well, I think I'm trying to remember if we talked about this before. I feel like we might have a little bit. So we had a player die in one of my other campaigns, my daughter's character. And it turned out she came back because the druid character decided to resurrect her or reincarnate her, and she had the spell. But everybody thought she was dead. We pretended she was dead for a long time. She was reincarnated from a tiefling to a hobbit, and nobody knew it for literally 2 years of campaigning, which is pretty hilarious. So anything can happen, and I think, but including you dead. So I don't try to prevent death. I try to make sure things are fair. But if one of these beloved characters were to die in our campaign, oh well. If they get, then the player can play a new one. If they somehow get resurrected or reincarnated, cool. Then the player can keep playing them. If there's a time period. Now, what I have done is, I will say that sometimes a character leaves the scene for whatever reason because a player leaves, and then off screen, I may have killed them or something. But that's different, right? That's part of the story. Or maybe the character came back, as the case with Craig, as someone else. And so it actually fit the story to kill the other one or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't think of player death particularly as something that should not happen. It's just something that probably will happen at some point. And if it does, it does. And I think that's important because if you don't think that way as a dungeon master, if you, the players will feel like there's a safety net. And I don't think you want your players to feel like there's a safety net because it makes the game feel, it makes your successes feel better if you feel like you could have failed.
Yes. I was more thinking, we have talked about this premise, and as I'm thinking about it and hearing the answer, I'm realizing that it's probably the doomsday clock, as I'm calling it, is the answer. Yeah. I meant more with there's like, in other words, we go, let's pretend all the criteria are met for resurrection. Gentle repose was cast, the body was preserved. What prevents them? Like, hey, Russ, yeah, we're just going to take the 25 days, go find the cleric and get resurrected. And I think I'm realizing the answer is that same doomsday.
So the doomsday clock, but also cost, right? So most of those things have huge component costs. So it's twofold. One,
I had forgotten about cost.
Make money not so, don't make your characters have buckets of money. Or you can, but if you do, then that's a price you're paying as a dungeon master. But then also make time expensive, time's a commodity that should be hard to come by in the game too. And so you should make time should be a penalty. When people use time, that's totally fine. But you do need, I think that's a really good, I think where you're going with this, Raef, is a really good advice, which is as a dungeon master, there should be the antagonist, the problem, whatever the characters are trying to fix or solve or be involved with, should be getting worse over time. It doesn't need to be like the city's going to explode and sink into the ocean kind of stuff, or that certainly could be one of them. But it just needs to be that something's getting worse. The crime lord's going to succeed in his plans, or the person you need to rescue might die or not make it to their wedding on time, or whatever, like there needs to be something that is putting time pressure on the party. And that really fixes a lot of the things that if you don't have that, suddenly you're like, how do I do this?
Yeah. And I think also the financial component, I'd forgotten about that. A lot of those wish and resurrection scenarios are really, really
expensive. Like 1,000 gold pieces of gem or something. Like they're stupid expensive.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Make money, be conservative with money. I mean, reward money, definitely use it, but don't let your characters, especially when they're lower levels, like keep an eye on their money and a ratio of money to level that's within reason. If your characters do get a lot of money or start having a lot of money, get them involved with something that is expensive. So right now, my other campaign in our Waterdeep campaign, Dragon Heist, the players are running a tavern. So they're getting money, like they're running this huge fancy inn, and they'll find 500 gold here and a couple hundred gold there. And they're like, yeah, great, we can buy a table. That'll buy one cask of this super fine wine we can serve at the inn. All of a sudden 500 gold is enough to run the inn for 3 days if you have a bad week, kind of thing. Like it, or we can get a new cook, so by giving them other expenses to deal with, and this is a great trick for high level characters, like make them try to build a fort or run some kind of operation or some big event or a business, and all of a sudden you got these huge expenses coming down the pike, and now that $100 pile of treasure, 100 gold treasure that you seemed huge at first level or second level is now like pittance compared to what you need.
That actually blends beautifully into my last question. I said 4, but I'm realizing that we won.
I said 4, but I only have 3.
Well, I have 4, but I realized we answered one, which was how do we handle, like, I'm going to kill the city guard. And you had answered that already in a prior one. So you can go back and listen to that one.
All right. Yeah.
So the fourth one is, how is it that you had, what is your belief? But it's more like, how is it that you figure out the economy? How do you know what's too much money before they've got too much money? How do you know it's too little money before? Do you have kind of formula? And I want you to talk about money, magic items, and healing potions. Like, how do you decide what they're going to get?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I do. So I still use a lot of I use a lot of pre-generated stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I use a lot of, in all my campaigns, and this just saves you so much time in thinking as a dungeon master. Because as you can see, even if you had everything pre-generated, there's still a lot of work to do. I mean, you got to think about the antagonist all the time and the clock, and then you have to have, read everything before your session and know what's going on. So by using pre-generated stuff, what that does is the dungeons and the rooms and everything is preceded with treasure and magic items. So when someone says, "Oh my God, I can't believe you put that there," I didn't put that there. It was there. Here it is. Here's your thing. Like I don't want to spoil, but Hugh the Axe, I didn't make that up. That was in the thing. So some of those things are just there. Now I loved Hugh the Axe because every aspect of it, including the fact that it doesn't like being in the woods, was just such a perfect fit. It was hilarious.
It is.
And then sometimes I do make things up. So other things are random. I'll roll for them. Like the staff that the druid got was a random treasure. And what I try to do is so basically pre-generated, which handles the amount of gold also in most cases. Now, in the Dungeon Master Guide, when you're building encounters, there's also a table for how much treasure should be on it. So you can kind of use that as a rule of thumb too.
Okay.
But basically, you want to make it so that the players are always a little like money's not just easy peasy. They should always be a little bit worried about money.
Yeah.
Or at least not have as much money as they always want to have. So I always try to look at like, what's the next thing my players really want? Like, is it plate mail? Is it just a sword? Is it passage on that ferry? Look at what that costs in the DMG or whatever. And then think about like, how much do I think this encounter or the situation should get them towards that goal? Should it be all of it? Should it be a little bit? Do I want to have the final encounter feel like, oh, yay, now we can finally do that? And so kind of move those milestones to those places. But the other thing I'll do is like the reason I rolled for the staff that John's character has now, and he got a really good thing, it was just a random roll, was that in that particular case, that particular place in the pre-generated, there wasn't any cool treasure, but the way the scenario had worked out and the way it became sort of a major milestone in the campaign, just because they came together, I felt like there should have been something, a little reward or something. And so I rolled for that. So, so I kind of do it based on like, should it be, it's almost like, would in a movie something cool happen here for the character? Like, should this be a developmental leap for somebody? And so I'll put something there. But the rest of the time, I'm just going with whatever's in the pre-generated book for the most part.
I see. So I am seeing that by paying attention to what they may be talking about, like, oh, I really need a magic weapon. I want to get a +1 longsword they're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. You might then in between sessions look it up and go, oh, look, that costs 500 gold. And do I want them to get that at the end of the adventure? No. Okay. Well, you might make sure that only, play by the book, but might only see that it's 250 gold that goes out so that it's 2 adventures before they can go back and buy it.
And by the way, you can turn that into a MacGuffin, right? So
yes,
MacGuffin is sort of the term of art used to mean whatever the plot device you've invented to get the movie going where you want it to go, right? So like unobtainium in Avatar is a MacGuffin, right? So for example, so for your own unobtainium, like, John's character now really wants to see your direwolf. And this has just been sort of a running joke because druids can transform into things they see if they're the right level. And direwolf happens to be one of the more powerful creatures that John's character could transform into, but he just hasn't happened to see a direwolf yet.
Right.
Every time he goes into a cave, he's like, is there a direwolf here? And so you can imagine how easy it would be for me to lure him somewhere if I were just to say, like, all of a sudden there's a guy running by going, oh my God, the village has been raided by a bunch of orcs on direwolves. They're still there now. Well, what happened? Well, John's character would be like, well, whatever we're doing now, I don't care. We're going to go do this village.
Right.
And so you can use what the characters talk about. So it's really important as a Dungeon Master not to check out when the characters are having debates and discussions about what they want to do next, because you can fold it into the story and use it. But don't make it, this is where the joke Monty Hall comes in. Don't make it just like every time they do something, they get something, and don't make it like whatever they talk about eventually always shows up. Choose the things that maybe show up or don't force it, but it can be a really good way to gauge roughly, when something should happen and when a major event that, really going to make a character happy is going to shine.
It's that this type of thing is something that I think a lot about, this balance between reward and earning things for fun. And I think it might be because right now, have you heard about how World of Warcraft has the classic servers?
Yes. Yeah.
And so they rolled out the second iteration of that, which is now called the Burning Crusade Classic. And so it's still classic, but it's the next expansion. And in classic, there's things like you don't get a mount. It was till 40. They moved it till 30 and level cap was 60. So you're hoofing it on your little feeties all over the map.
Right.
And there's times, but in retail, WoW is what it's called, the newer version. There's two simultaneous versions. Your character doesn't live in both. You pick one server or the other. You know, you can get a mount at level 0. I mean, you can get a mount at level 10, and that mount can fly. And so you're zipping all over the map. And there's this interesting reward to sort of having to earn, like you're super excited when you get to the level to be able to get a mount to then go 50% more. But then if it's not done correctly, like I'm sure, Russ, you've played video games where the save feature is just enough to be annoying, or the travel system is just enough to be annoying. So this is really interesting balance that I'm like, you know, because everybody agrees the classic balance that they've struck is cool, but not annoying. And I find that's what happens in D&D, except I don't have the skills of a World of Warcraft creator. And so I'll accidentally flood them with too much magic items. Then it's not fun to get a magic item, or I'll go the other way and they never get anything. And then they're kind of pissed. And so
my rule of thumb is it's always easier to give than take away. So be very sparing in giving those things out. You know, and I think also watch how the combats are going too. So, you know, like if they're getting to a level where, you know, half the monsters they're starting to run into are, you know, not really hurt by non-magic items, it might be time to, you know, give at least a couple people some magic items kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it really, you know, really, and by the way, the magic items, we talked last time a little bit about balanced scenarios. Magic items really throw a kink into the classic formula for how you build a balanced encounter, right? Because magic items aren't factored into your XP and your hero's level. So just taking the hero's level and comparing it to the monster's XP doesn't account for the fact if your character's got a wand of fireballs, you know? So you do want to be very careful with magic items. And like one of the things in my Dragon Heist campaign, I decided every once in a while I'll just roll randomly for a magic item. Because like I said, the dice should tell the story, even if I don't want it to happen. And they actually got my absolute least favorite magic item in the game for players to get a hold of. They got a bag of holding. In my mind, the bag of holding is one of the most, there are worse, but it's up there in terms of OP magic items. Because it gives you so many freaking options in so many scenarios. Although it was hilarious to see them sneak a prisoner out of a jail inside a bag of holding in the middle of broad daylight with everybody there. That was hilarious. We
have time if there are, you know, newer role players that don't know all the, you know, maybe give the top 10 things people do with bags of holding, which is why you hate them.
Well, so bags of holding. So the idea, if you don't know what a bag of holding is, so the bag of holding looks like a normal pouch, right? But you open it up to extra dimensional space. And so inside the bag is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's literally another dimension inside this bag. And they describe the dimensions. I want to say it's like a 10 by 10 foot hole kind of thing. I don't think that's exactly right, but something like that.
Yeah, they give the dimensions of what the bag mouth opening will open up into.
Yes. Now, what's also been nice is in the latest version, in 5e, they also tell you how long someone could live inside there if it was closed, but based on the amount of air, which is very handy because my party just snuck a guy out. So a lot of times people will hide people inside the bag of holding. That's a common trick. You can also put a god-awful amount of stuff in there. So another thing you can do, Raef, to prevent your party from getting too rich is don't forget that carrying coins is a non-trivial task. So if you find like 500 silver pieces, right? Like that's hard to carry 500 silver pieces. Like that's not going to be something you're just going to pick up and run around with. It's going to be heavy, be shaking, you know, especially if it's copper, it's even worse. Of course, gold is not even better. So they need to transfer all the gems, but then at the giant hoard site, it's not there. So make it also a challenge. Like the party harvested that dragon. Those dragon parts probably could be sold for some pretty good money. Half of them already burnt because they had to carry them around. They had to put them on a sledge. and now they got burnt. So make carrying this stuff around like non-trivial. Another reason I hate bag of holding is it solves that problem because you can stuff a lot of crap inside the bag of holding, and it's pretty much protected from everything.
And it creates, for those that again are intimately familiar with bag of holdings, it's weightless too. So like you can put, a
there's
chest
no encumbrance. So you can stuff those 200 coins in there, no problem.
Yeah.
But then also what this party did was I had this, it was brilliant. Actually, I can't really fault them. There's this item they captured. And they know there's this big bad, sort of crime lord in the city of Waterdeep who wants this item and had it in his possession at once. And they had this item, and every time, every day or so, agents of this overlord would attack them. And they're like, that guy is scrying us. That guy is following us. How does he know where we are? And then they realized, oh crap, the item we stole from him, he must have a link to it. So they put the item in the bag of holding, knowing that puts it in a different dimension. And almost all scrying spells say can find anywhere on the current plane. So they were like, it was brilliant. And sure enough, the next day, all the attacks stopped. And they're like, we did it. And I'm like, damn it, that bag of holding. But I got to say, that was pretty brilliant. And the wizards figured it out, which makes sense because he's a wizard. So that whole thing was pretty neat. And so it's neat. But the bag of holding is one of those things where you can really work around a lot of things. I tease. It's one of the magic items that if your party gets, it solves a lot of problems for them. That's one of the things it bothers me about a little bit. Like, do you need a horse and cart? If you had a bag of holding, if you guys had a bag of holding, all those dragon parts would have been there. You wouldn't have needed the pony. You wouldn't have needed the sledge.
We wouldn't have
complexity goes away.
We wouldn't have all the role playing about the pony. We wouldn't have Seppi worried about the ponies. We wouldn't have Doc sleeping the ponies.
Exactly. So I just think it removes a lot of it makes some parts of the game too easy. But then it adds new things, which I like too, like them trying to get out of that prison with a guy before he ran out of breath. And that was another moment where I was tracking the rounds.
Yes.
Because he had 2 minutes of air. So I'm like, okay, it takes you about 30 seconds to get up the stairs. Oh, but the guard at the top of the stairs, he's asking you if you can go get him that sandwich back from his desk downstairs. Could you get him the sandwich? They're like, damn it. He's like, how do I not make a suspicion by not telling him no to his freaking sandwich? Which is pretty hilarious. So as a dungeon master, you can sort of put these little innocuous things in the way, because in rounds turns, another challenge you have is a round, a combat round is like 6 seconds. So as soon as you have anything that lasts minutes, it feels like forever.
Yeah.
But by injecting dialogue or a pause in there and then timing the players, it's another trick. You'd be like, oh, hey guys, we're in dialogue mode. I'm just going to start a timer. Just by saying that, just FYI, I'm starting a timer. Everybody's like, yeah. What? Wait, what is he? What's happening?
Yeah, that gives heart palpitations to all player characters.
Hey guys, just so you know, great conversation, loving the dialogue. This is fantastic. 30 seconds have elapsed. The players are like, what? What's going on? Hey, just so you know, guys, it's been a minute and a half. Wait, the guy's run out of air. He's got 30 seconds. Run for the door. Kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got time for one more question, and it kind of stems from the bag of holding. Then, so as the GM, you have ultimate design over the world.
Yeah.
Did you consider, you'll even read in some of the source materials, things like, as a GM, decide if you're high fantasy, is magic prevalent and not strange to the eye, or is magic super rare and only certain people can cast it? So how did you consider and go, I hate bags of holding and 3 other items and go, you know what, they don't exist in my world? Did you?
Actually, I did. So in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I actively made sure no bags of holding ever appeared, and they made it all the way to like 15th level, never saw a bag of holding. In this one, they were like level 3, and they did something really smart. And they got to this little hoard of treasure. And I decided to roll for a random magic item, and I rolled bag of holding. And I said to them when I did it, because I rolled it sort of live, they didn't see the roll, but they were there. And I said, okay, I just rolled something I would normally never give you guys, but you went through an entire campaign without ever having it. And the dice have spoken, and you did work really hard. So I'm going to give it to you. It's a bag of holding. My brother literally cheered, a bag of holding. Oh my God, we got a bag of holding. I did think about it. But I'd already denied them for one whole campaign. So I kind of it was the same players. So I kind of let it in.
Yep.
And I don't regret it now though, because it's led to some pretty neat moments. So, but the point there is less never allow a bag of holding in your campaign, and more just know when you're thinking about magic items. And I know the list of magic items reasonably well enough that when I roll them, I kind of know what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
if you're not really familiar with the magic item list that well, read a few of them and pick one to give, and do try to pick things that you think won't make a lot of the situations you're like. Flying's another one you got to be careful with, right?
Yes.
Once players can fly, it changes a lot
everything
mechanics of the game. And I think Seppi just got fly, for example, the fly spell, which is fun. It just changes. It moves things to the next level. And as a dungeon master, in order to make things challenging, you have to move things to the next level.
Right.
And so as soon as you're starting to bring things that can counter fly, everything's just escalated one notch. Right. So that's sort of the pitfalls you got to watch out for, which is why I really like starting over at level 1 every time with players, because it's so refreshing to get back down to just the basics. Like you're there.
It is so refreshing. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this campaign. I've often found that once I get beyond about a level 7, either the great game mechanics break, like flying inside my brain, and I just don't have as much fun as I do running around killing goblins and skeletons from levels 1 to 7. So I'm curious to see under your tutelage what 7 through 15 or 20 will look like.
Oh, there are ways to deal with flying, Raef. You just wait.
Well, maybe that's Academy number 4. Well, I was going to end with that. Are there things? So those are all the lists of my questions. As I sit here today, I don't have any more to do, but I like doing these GM's academies. What do you think's fertile ground for us to explore next? It sounds like flying. How to deal with the power, I don't know what, like a character's after level 5 or something.
Might be good, but maybe we wait till you guys get there. I think it might be fun to interview a different dungeon master. So I think it'd be great to have John on.
Okay.
One of the things that might be fun to talk to John about that I can't really help on at all is how do you go about creating your own world? So, let's say, you are, everything I do is based on pre-gen stuff. So I'm mostly thinking about the mechanics and storytelling and that sort of stuff, which is awesome. But a lot of people like to part of the fun of being a dungeon master is building the world itself, and then showing it to your players, right? The world building with them. And so I think that's something that John really enjoys. I think that's his sort of
his expertise.
Yeah. His special gift as dungeon master. So I think it might be fun to have John on.
All right. We'll have him on the topic of world building.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that'd be great.
Okay.
And then I think whatever else. Seppi mentioned something last session. He was like, "You should include this in DM Academy again," and I forget what he said.
I thought we covered it.
Maybe.
He raised it in, and I don't have my other notes in front of me because I've turned my monitors off. But yeah, we covered it. It was I think it was, what do you do? How do you handle when the characters don't go where you want them to go?
Oh, that was that one last time.
I thought that was Seppi's
time, but I
he had another one. Okay.
Oh, it was nowhere. It was keeping the world. It was keeping the world like you can go anywhere and live. And that was what he liked.
Yeah, we covered that.
And I think he also is liking, I don't know if we've talked about this much. I think he was also enjoying the fact that the monsters are not necessarily all evil all the time. Like we're playing around with the monsters and morality, kind of thing. I think he likes that too. Like some of the monsters seem to be able to be converted to good and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that is fun.
Which I think we talked a little bit about last time too. So I won't belabor.
No, we didn't actually. Let's put that on the list of having antagonists that aren't necessarily evil.
Yeah, because remember, the villain is the hero of their own story, right? Like the villain's never evil, and the classic example of that now.
You mean the hero's never evil?
No. The villain. Is the hero of his own story, right?
Yeah.
So from the villain's perspective, he's a hero. And the classic example of that everybody knows now is Thanos, right? Thanos thinks he was doing good, right? He was making the universe a better place just by cutting the population in half. That solves everything.
Right. And, having the courage to do it.
That's right. Not everybody could be as bold as he was. Everybody's got all these ties to these people, but I'm just being the guy. It needs to be done. I'm sorry. It just needs to be done. I mean, if we're all a little smarter, you'd figure it out. Right. And that's him. But a lot of these villains are, a lot of villains in a lot of story arcs are sort of that way. And so it's really sort of that thing. And you can put a lot of different cool sort of spins on that. So I think that's a lot of fun. And I think it's fun too, to have those things be surprises. And one of the things also we can do.
Hold on one second, Russ. I'm being mindful of time for you. Do you have time?
Oh, yes, we got to roll. Okay. So yes. Okay. So next time too, Raef, let's talk about that. And let's talk about how do you reveal sort of complicated plot moments.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Like a twist. Like how do you foreshadow without giving it away and then reveal a major plot twist?
Okay.
Foreshadow. I don't think I've mastered that yet, by the way, but I'm trying something I'm working on really hard.
That's really good. I like that. And then reveal.
Excellent.
Okay. I wrote that down.
All right.
Don't jump off. I have one quick question for you.
Yes, go.
No, I mean, after we.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll wrap it up here and then you can talk to me off the air. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Raef, again for another episode of Dungeon Master Academy, DM's Academy for short, or I guess Game Master. It really works for any game. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you guys next time on the D6 Generation.
Next time, guys.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@the d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.